They don't fear your silence because it's empty. They fear it because it watches, because it sees through their masks and refuses to perform. We live in a world addicted to noise, voices screaming for attention, power, validation. But there's a kind of person who does not need to speak to be powerful. They listen, they observe, and they wait. Nietzsche once said, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." That kind of silence, it's not weakness, it's flight. It terrifies people because it cannot be controlled. This is the philosophy of dangerous silence, and once you understand it, you will never be underestimated again. In today's world, loudness is mistaken for power. The person who dominates conversations, floods the internet with opinions, or performs their confidence on every social stage is seen as strong, influential, even admirable. But Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher of depth and destruction, saw through the noise. To him, true power did not shout. It did not seek applause. It sat quietly in the back of the room, watching, calculating, and waiting. While the world celebrates extroversion and expression, Nietzsche admired the dangerously silent, the ones who do not react, who refuse to explain themselves, who remain unreadable. Why? Because such silence is not emptiness. It's control. It's presence without performance. And that unsettles people more than any outburst ever could. You see, society has a formula. If you speak, you exist. If you are visible, you are valuable. But what happens when someone walks through life refusing to play that game? When they don't seek validation, don't rush to defend, don't crave attention? That kind of person terrifies the crowd, because you can't manipulate someone who does not need your approval. You can't overpower someone who's already mastered themselves. Nietzsche understood this. He called for the rise of a new kind of human, not one who fits in, but one who transcends. The Übermensch, a being of silence and steel, unshakable, unapologetic, not because he's loud, but because he does not need to be. In this video, we will explore Nietzsche's radical view of strength. We will dig into the philosophy of still power, how silence reveals truth, commands fear, and turns the individual into a force beyond comprehension. From the will to power to the death of ego, you'll see why the quietest ones are often the most dangerous, and more importantly, how you can become one of them. We live in a world that never shuts up. Scroll through social media and you will find a constant, desperate hunger to be noticed. People yelling into the void with selfies, opinions, outrage, and virtue signaling. Everyone is performing. Everyone wants to be seen. But Nietzsche would look at this modern circus with disgust. To him, this was not strength. It was a symptom of spiritual decay. He saw this coming over a century ago. A world where humans would trade meaning for comfort, truth for applause, where the pursuit of greatness would be replaced by the obsession with being liked. He called this kind of human the last man. The last man is not evil. He's not a monster. He's worse. He's safe. He avoids risk, avoids conflict, avoids depth. He seeks pleasure, popularity, and comfort above all else. And today, the last man is everywhere. He tweets his outrage. He curates his image. He consumes endlessly, posts endlessly, and thinks he's free. But he's trapped in the prison of other people's opinions. He is addicted to the noise. You see, Nietzsche believed most people fear silence, because silence forces you to meet yourself. And when you have built your identity around being seen and validated, being alone with your own thoughts is unbearable. That's why stillness feels awkward. That's why being unreadable makes people uncomfortable. Because when someone does not react, does not post, does not overshare, they become a mirror. And most people can't stand to look in that mirror. They would rather drown in the crowd than face the uncomfortable truth of who they really are. In this world of endless noise, those who are silent are misjudged. They are called arrogant, cold, weak, awkward, antisocial. But Nietzsche would say, that's because the herd does not understand strength. It only understands attention. The silent individual threatens the herd because he cannot be categorized. He does not beg to be liked. He's not following the script. And so, the herd turns on him, labeling what it cannot control. But Nietzsche admired this type of person, the one who walks alone, not because they can't fit in, but because they refuse to shrink themselves to be accepted. He believed true power lies in the one who can endure isolation, who does not need external validation to feel real. Because when your identity is not built on other people's applause, you become untouchable. So, in a society addicted to being seen, the most terrifying person is the one who does not care if you are looking. In Nietzsche's world, strength does not look like what society praises. It is not loud, boastful, or reactive. It is not the man constantly asserting his opinions, chasing applause, or trying to dominate every room. Real strength, Nietzsche believed, is quiet. It observes, it waits, and when necessary, it strikes with terrifying precision. At the center of Nietzsche's philosophy is the idea of the Übermensch, often misunderstood. He's not some arrogant alpha male, nor a ruthless tyrant. He's someone who has transcended the moral rules of the herd. He lives beyond good and evil, not because he is immoral, but because he creates his own values. And to do that, he must first walk alone. The Übermensch is dangerous not because he seeks power, but because he does not need it to feel complete. He does not scream to be heard. He does not beg to be understood. He simply is, grounded, inward, purposeful. He is silent because he is full. In a world addicted to reaction, silence becomes a signal of depth. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." That why, that internal purpose, is what anchors the silent archetype. He does not move based on trends or outrage or groupthink. He is rooted in something deeper, a personal mission, a philosophy, a code. And because of this, he becomes unpredictable, unreadable, unshakable. People fear what they can't understand. They fear what they can't control. So when someone does not play the social game, when someone is not emotionally exposed or performative, society labels them as cold, dangerous, or even inhuman. But Nietzsche would say, that's the point. The silent archetype does not react because he does not need to. He does not gossip. He does not engage in small wars to feel alive. He does not bark when provoked. He knows that true power is not reactive. It is sovereign. This man walks into a room and says nothing, but his presence disturbs the shallow, because the shallow thrive on noise. They fear the stillness that silence brings, because in silence, truth echoes. Now contrast this man with the reactive man, the one who must shout to feel heard, who must win arguments to feel intelligent, who must surround himself with validation to escape his emptiness. This man is not strong, he's afraid. He hides behind noise because silence would reveal the void inside. Nietzsche's silent archetype has already faced that void, and he has emerged from it not broken, but sharpened. Alone, not because he was rejected, but because he chose solitude over selling his soul, and that makes him terrifying. In a world built on performance, he chooses substance. In a world obsessed with attention, he chooses depth. In a world begging for reaction, he chooses stillness. This is the kind of man Nietzsche admired, not the conqueror, not the influencer, not the puppet of the masses, but the one who walks his path, unshaken, unmoved, because he's already conquered himself. That is the silent archetype. That is proto-Übermensch. And that is why Nietzsche's most dangerous man does not scream. He watches, he waits, and when he moves, the world listens. Silence is not emptiness. It is not the absence of something. Silence is a presence, a mirror that reflects everything others try to hide. When you walk into a room and choose silence, you disturb the balance. Because most people are not searching for truth. They are searching for control. Control over how they are perceived. Control over how others react to them. Control over the narrative. But silence removes that control. When you don't respond, when you don't explain, when you just look, you force people to confront the one thing they fear most, themselves. This is why Nietzsche believed that silence was a form of power. Because when you withhold words, you don't just conserve energy, you deny others the illusion that they understand you. And people fear what they can't interpret. They fear what they can't predict. They fear what they can't manipulate. Most conversations today are not exchanges. They are performances. Two egos trying to impress, dominate, or win approval. And when one person refuses to perform, the whole show collapses. Silence holds a mirror. It shows people how much noise they truly need to feel alive. Have you ever made eye contact with someone who could not hold it? Or remained calm while someone else tried to provoke you? Or simply said nothing and watched their discomfort grow? That's not weakness, that's power through restraint. As Nietzsche might say, you terrify them not because you speak, but because you won't. Because your silence suggests you don't need their approval. You don't need to be seen. And in a world where validation is currency, that makes you unfathomably rich. Let's go deeper. Psychologically, silence strips away social armor. Words are often shields. We talk to fill space, to avoid awkwardness, to defend ourselves from being too visible. But when one person chooses silence, they force everyone else to sit in the rawness of the moment. That moment reveals everything. Who's insecure, who's pretending, who needs attention, and who's silently watching. Modern psychology backs this up. People who are uncomfortable with silence are usually uncomfortable with themselves. They fear the empty space, not because it's empty, but because it forces their inner world to echo back at them. Silence is not passive, it's aggressive in its clarity. Let's look at real-world examples. Take elite interrogators. They use silence more than pressure, because the moment they stop speaking, the suspect starts unraveling. Why? Because the silence becomes unbearable, a vacuum that demands to be filled. Or consider powerful leaders. Think of someone like Vladimir Putin. He does not need to shout. He does not explain himself. He often just waits, staring still, letting others feel the weight of their own nerves. His silence says, I don't need to show strength. You'll feel it. Even in fiction, think of Don Draper in Mad Men. Rarely emotional, rarely reactive. But when he speaks, people listen. Not because he's loud, but because his silence made every word heavier. Now compare that to the man who argues on Twitter all day, the one who needs a crowd to feel valid, the one who can't sleep until his opinion is known. That man is loud, but he is not powerful. His noise is proof of his emptiness. His endless opinions are proof of his lack of clarity. Nietzsche's silent archetype does not play this game. He does not explain himself because he's already done the explaining to himself. His silence is not cold, it is controlled. It is built on inner certainty. And nothing scares the uncertain more than someone who does not flinch. Because silence reveals the cracks in their armor. It strips them of their ability to hide behind performance. And in that moment, they are naked. That is why they fear you. Not because of what you might say, but because they can't see what's coming. They can't predict your next move. And unpredictability is power. So the next time someone pushes for a reaction, pause, breathe, let the silence speak for you, and watch them tremble under its weight. In a world obsessed with dominance, louder voices, bigger followings, faster opinions, Nietzsche gave us something radically different, the will to power. But this idea is misunderstood. The will to power is not about crushing others. It's not about screaming louder or controlling people through brute force. At its core, it's about mastery over the self, self-overcoming, taming your impulses, disciplining your desires, channeling your energy inward until it builds, condenses, and becomes unshakable. And that's where silence becomes dangerous. Because silence is not the absence of power, it's the containment of it. Stillness is not weakness, it is concentration. Nietzsche never told you to chase attention. He told you to transform yourself, to become the kind of individual who does not need to raise his voice to be heard, because his presence already says enough. There's a reason Nietzsche did not write long manifestos or preach with endless lectures. He used aphorisms, sharp, explosive sentences. A single line could carry the weight of an entire philosophy. Why? Because truth does not need volume. It needs density, like, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. That sentence is not just wisdom, it's a blade, minimal, sharp, precise, just like the kind of silence he admired. This is the same principle behind true power, not chaos, not noise, but focus and restraint. Because silence is not just passive, it's strategic. You can use silence to unsettle an enemy, to establish dominance without ever raising a hand, to test a person's mind, to see how long they last without validation. Stillness is an interrogation technique, a negotiation tactic, a spiritual practice. When you speak, you reveal. When you stay silent, you observe. And observation is the first step to control. Think of this in modern terms. In a world where people tweet every thought, where influencers sell authenticity but never stop talking, the one who says nothing, who sits with himself, refines his own being, acts only when necessary, that person becomes mythic. Why? Because stillness creates mystery, and mystery creates power. This is the will to power expressed through non-action, a kind of resistance, the ability to say, I do not owe you my energy. I do not need to be understood. I am not afraid of being unknown. The herd cannot stand this, because the herd survives on feedback, on affirmation, on shared signals. But the Nietzschean individual, the one becoming an Übermensch, speaks less and becomes more. That's the paradox. The less you say, the more they feel. The quieter you become, the more they project onto you. And that projection, that's power. You are no longer just a man. You are a symbol, a question they can't answer. And in that question lies your control. So ask yourself, do you want to be loud or do you want to be felt? Do you want attention or influence? The will to power is not about performing strength. It's about becoming so grounded, so internalized in your mission that nothing shakes you. Not silence, not solitude, not being misunderstood. Because that's the final mastery. The ability to move through the world quietly and still bend it around your will. He's shy. She's just socially awkward. They must be insecure. That's the label society slaps on quiet people. Not strong, not focused, just something's wrong with them. But Nietzsche would laugh at this. To him, quietness was not a flaw. It was a sign of refinement, not passivity, but selectivity. In a world of constant noise, the person who chooses silence is not failing to speak. They are refusing to waste words. Today we have been conditioned to explain everything, to speak on every issue, to share every thought, to perform transparency 24/7, as if withholding anything makes you suspicious. But Nietzsche's worldview flips that. He believed the more grounded a person is, the less they need to say, the less they owe the world their internal life. Because true self-possession doesn't beg to be seen. Society misunderstands quiet people because it fears what it cannot read. And Nietzsche knew this deeply. He said, invisible threads are the strongest ties. The silent person holds those threads. While everyone else flails, seeking attention, the quiet one watches, waits, calculates. They don't speak to fill space. They speak when it matters. And that's what makes them dangerous. Because society assumes that if you are not talking, you must be unsure. But often it's the opposite. You're not unsure. You are unimpressed. You're not lost. You're not interested in playing their game. Think of it. In meetings, the person who talks the most is not always the smartest. In arguments, the loudest one is often the least secure. On social media, the most reactive people are the easiest to manipulate. Quiet people, the ones who pause, who listen, who reflect. They hold psychological gravity. And Nietzsche would say, that's not weakness, that's a different kind of strength. But modern life does not know what to do with strength that isn't flashy. It wants declarations, hashtags, speeches. It wants your soul on display. But silence does not give that. It protects the soul instead. And that's the misunderstanding. Quiet people are not behind, they are ahead. So far ahead, they don't need to announce it. They have seen through the performance. They have chosen depth over attention. And in a world drowning in noise, that decision is revolutionary. So, how do you tap into this terrifying Nietzschean silence? It starts with one thing: restraint. Most people feel the urge to respond immediately, to explain, to defend, but true power lies in pauses. Let silence speak. Let people squirm in it. Let them fill the gap. And watch what they reveal. Because silence does two things. It exposes others, and it elevates you. Imagine a confrontation. Instead of reacting emotionally, you stay quiet. You hold your posture. You wait. Suddenly, they are the ones unraveling, because silence throws the insecure off balance. It denies them the feedback loop they crave. It turns their performance into a monologue, and them into a fool. Nietzsche did not just write about silence, he lived it. His aphorisms were brief, surgical, unsettling. He was not interested in comforting you. He wanted to pierce through you. with minimal words. That's the key. Don't explain everything. Mystery is power. The more you reveal, the more predictable you become. And Nietzsche believed the strong individual is never fully readable. This isn't about manipulation. It's about self-possession. You don't owe your inner world to everyone. Let them wonder. Let them project. Your silence becomes a mirror. Their reaction tells you everything. So how do you build this stillness? Not through noise, but through solitude. Take time to be alone. Write. Reflect. Not for social media, not for validation, but for clarity. Ask yourself, where am I reactive? Where do I feel the urge to explain, to prove, to perform? Then, let that urge die. Because as Nietzsche said, become who you are, not who you have been trained to act like, not who the crowd accepts, but the real you, the one beneath the noise. And that version of you does not need to shout. It's enough to walk into a room and say nothing. Because everything about you already says, I know who I am. In the end, Nietzsche's silent figure is not shy. It's not passive. It's precise, detached, sharp like a blade that never needs to be unsheathed. In a world that rewards noise, constant posting, oversharing, explaining, silence becomes a rebellion. It says, I don't need your approval. I don't fear your misunderstanding. I have already mastered myself. You are just catching up. And that is terrifying. People will mock you. They will label you cold, arrogant, difficult. Not because you are, but because they can't read you. And what they can't read, they can't control. You will make them uncomfortable, not by yelling, but by watching, not by fighting, but by not reacting. Because silence is not absence. It's presence, intensified. It's the power of a mind that doesn't need to announce itself. It waits. And when it acts, it's decisive, unstoppable, final. So, if you have ever felt like you don't fit the noisy world, good. Maybe you were not meant to. You were not born to be loud. You were born to be unshakable. Be silent and let them feel it. If this message cut deeper than you expected, if you felt seen in ways you can't explain, subscribe, because this is just the beginning. Here, we don't follow the noise. We go deeper every single week.